There is a battle happening inside you every single day, even when everything looks calm on the outside. And maybe the most dangerous part of this war is not the noise, but the fact that almost no one realizes it's even happening. Because this is not a visible fight. It is not a fight you can point to. It is not a conflict you can explain easily to other people. It's internal, it's subtle, it's repetitive, it's quiet, and it happens in the place where most people never learn to pay attention: your mind. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something very clearly. Stay until the end of this message, because at the end, we are going to pray a short prayer, but not just a religious prayer. This is an aligning prayer, a prayer that reaches deeper than routine, deeper than tradition, deeper than habit. It's a prayer that reorganizes your inner world mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it closes a cycle that begins right now, in this exact moment, as you listen to these words. Maybe you arrived here feeling tired, not physically tired, but tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. A kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes, a pressure in the chest, a weight in the mind. Maybe you've been feeling confused, like your thoughts are constantly moving, but never producing clarity. Your mind is always busy, but never actually resting. You pray, you try to trust, you try to have faith, you try to surrender, but something keeps draining your strength little by little, and you don't even know what it is. And here is the truth. The problem is not that you don't have enough faith. The problem is that there is a very specific kind of thought that weakens faith before it even has the chance to fully manifest. Jesus warned about it, but most people never noticed. When Jesus said, "Watch," he wasn't talking only about external behavior. He wasn't saying, "Watch your actions" only. He was talking about something deeper. He was talking about inner attention. The word watch in the original biblical context carries the meaning of being awake inside, not just awake physically, awake internally, aware of what passes through the mind, aware of what repeats silently, aware of what looks harmless but slowly installs itself as truth. Because anything that repeats inside you eventually begins to govern you. It begins to govern your decisions, your emotions, your reactions, your expectations, and even the way you relate to God. And maybe you never realized this, but most spiritual battles do not begin with sin. They begin with a tolerated thought, a thought you don't confront, a thought you let pass, a thought you repeat internally without even noticing. And that is exactly where faith begins to weaken. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, day after day. The Bible says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." That is not poetry. That is a precise description of internal function. Because in biblical language, the heart is not just emotion. The heart is the center of decision, the deepest mind, the inner government of the self. When Jesus said, "Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks," he was revealing a principle that is both spiritual and neurological at the same time. Whatever occupies your mind in silence eventually expresses itself in your life as actions, words, choices, and patterns. And this is where most people lose the war. They believe they need to fight bad thoughts with force, with resistance, with tension, with mental violence. But Jesus never taught mental fighting. He taught watching. He taught awareness. He taught alignment. There is a huge difference between fighting a thought and simply refusing to agree with it. Modern science calls this neuroplasticity. Psychology calls it cognitive reinforcement. But the Bible has been teaching it for thousands of years. Repeated thoughts create pathways. Pathways create habits, create identity, and identity defines destiny. This is not mystical, it is structural. It is how the human brain works. And maybe you've been trying to win a spiritual battle using only emotional effort, when what has been missing is mental direction. Jesus did not react impulsively. He did not respond immediately to every stimulus. He withdrew, he silenced, he observed, he chose what he would agree with internally. When Jesus was in the desert being tempted, the battle was not external, it was internal. It was a conversation disguised as dialogue. If you are the Son of God, notice that the temptation does not begin by denying God. It begins by questioning identity, because identity destabilized weakens faith always. The enemy does not need to destroy you if he can confuse you. He does not need to knock you down if he can distract you. He does not need to pull you away from God if he can make you doubt quietly. And maybe that is exactly what you are living right now. Not a dramatic collapse, not a visible crisis, but a slow erosion. Small doubts, small questions, small thoughts that whisper, maybe this won't work. Maybe God won't act this time. Maybe I'm alone in this. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm the exception. These thoughts seem small, but they carry enormous weight because they repeat, and repetition creates internal reality. Cognitive psychology shows that the brain does not easily distinguish between a thought that is true and a thought that is emotionally repeated. If something repeats with enough emotional charge, the brain records it as a pattern, and patterns govern behavior. That is why Jesus said, "The truth will set you free." Not because truth is poetic, not because truth is motivational, but because truth interrupts destructive mental patterns. There is a reason Jesus said, "Do not fear," so many times. Not because fear is a sin, but because sustained fear creates a mental state that blocks faith from operating fully.
Fear occupies the space of trust. Doubt occupies the space of surrender. Anxiety occupies the space of rest. And none of that happens suddenly. It happens slowly, silently, inside the mind. Maybe you've been trying to strengthen your faith by adding more information, more messages, more videos, more stimulation, more content. But Jesus taught something different. He taught removal, silence, observation, watching, choosing. And here is a hard truth, but also a liberating one. You do not need to defeat every thought. You only need to stop agreeing with the wrong ones. Because what you agree with becomes stronger. What you observe without identification loses power. Jesus knew this. That is why he did not react like everyone else. That is why he slept in the storm. That is why he remained calm in chaos. Not because chaos didn't exist, but because he refused to let chaos govern his mind. And if you are here right now, there is a reason. Because recognizing the war is the first step to not losing it. In the next part, we are going to go deeper into something very specific. What is the one thought that weakens faith more than any other? How does it install itself? How does it disguise itself as logic? How does it pretend to be wisdom? How does it pretend to be realism? And how did Jesus teach, practically, to disarm it without internal violence, without mental exhaustion, and without religious guilt? Stay with me, because the most important part is still ahead. There is one specific thought that weakens faith more than any other, and it rarely appears as something negative. It does not show up as darkness. It shows up as logic. It shows up as prudence. It shows up as realism. It is the thought that says, maybe this works for others, but not for me. That thought sounds reasonable. It even sounds humble. But in reality, it corrodes faith at the root, because it separates the promise from personal experience. And Jesus confronted this constantly. When he asked, "Why did you doubt?" he was not accusing, he was inviting awareness. The doubt that weakens faith is not the doubt that seeks understanding, it is the doubt that becomes identity. It is when the mind begins to see itself as a negative exception, as someone who always tries but never receives, as someone who believes but never fully, as someone who prays but nothing happens. And that is extremely dangerous, because faith does not operate only by what you believe intellectually. Faith operates by what you expect internally. The Bible says, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Notice, faith is not only belief, it is expectation. And expectation is born in the mind. If the mind is occupied by thoughts of anticipated failure, thoughts of repeated disappointment, thoughts of fear of being hurt again, then faith may still exist, but it is suffocated, like a seed planted in hardened soil. Neuroscience explains that the human brain learns through emotional association. If you tried to trust, tried to pray, tried to hope, and you associated that with pain, frustration, silence, or excessive delay, the brain creates a protection mechanism. It begins to lower expectation to avoid suffering. That is not lack of faith, that is unconscious self-protection. But Jesus never treated faith as emotion alone. He treated it as posture. That is why he said things that sounded hard. Unless you become like children. Children do not carry accumulated emotional history. They expect without cynicism. They trust without calculation. Not because they are naive, but because they have not learned to anticipate pain before experience. Adults, on the other hand, learn to protect themselves mentally, and that protection, when it is not observed, becomes a prison. Maybe you're not trapped because you lack faith. Maybe you're trapped because you have too many unresolved memories. Every prayer that seemed unanswered, every waiting season that hurt, every silence that confused you, it all accumulates and it forms an internal narrative. And internal narratives are powerful. They shape how you interpret God, how you interpret life, how you interpret yourself. Jesus never denied human pain. He cried, he felt anguish, he sweat blood. But there is something he never did. He never allowed pain to define his identity. He never allowed circumstances to dictate his inner truth. That is why he could say, "Your faith has made you whole," even when everything around looked like the opposite. And here is the critical point. Faith is not denying reality. Faith is choosing which reality governs your mind, the external or the internal, the circumstantial or the deep. When Jesus walked on water, Peter succeeded as long as his attention remained aligned. The moment the mind fragmented, the body responded. That is not only symbolic, that is neurological. Sustained attention creates stability. Fragmented attention creates falling. Psychology calls this attentional focus. The Bible calls it fixed gaze. Fixing your eyes on Jesus is not just a poetic metaphor, it is practical instruction. Whatever you fix, you strengthen. Whatever you observe without attachment loses power. Whatever you feed in silence grows. Whatever you watch begins to organize. Maybe you've been trying to change your life without first reorganizing your mind, trying to win externally a war that is still happening internally, and that creates spiritual exhaustion, because you pray, but you leave prayer with the mind in the same place. You listen to messages, but you return to the same patterns, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin to think the problem is you. But Jesus never treated people as the problem. He treated patterns, he treated thoughts, he treated inner postures. When he said, "Go and sin no more," it was not moralistic, it was liberation from a pattern, an invitation not to return to the same internal structure that produced pain. There is a sentence that summarizes everything. What you tolerate in your mind today will govern your faith tomorrow. Not because God changes, but because you change. Your perception changes. Your expectation changes. Your posture changes. And faith is posture. And here is the turning point. You do not need to eliminate negative thoughts. That is impossible. The brain produces thoughts automatically. What you need is to stop identifying with them. Jesus did not teach mental control. He taught discernment. He taught separation. He taught how to distinguish what comes from outside versus what rises from inside. What is noise versus what is truth. What is fear versus what is direction. When you observe a thought without agreeing, it loses power. When you enter into dialogue with it, it gains energy. That is why Jesus responded with scripture, not to argue, but to end the conversation. Truth does not debate with lies. Truth occupies space. In the next part, we are going to enter exactly into how Jesus practiced this daily, how he positioned himself internally, how he dealt with silence, how he dealt with waiting, how he dealt with delayed answers, and how you can apply this in a simple, practical, and deep way without changing who you are, but changing how you align inside. Stay with me, because this is where the war begins to lose power. Jesus did not win the inner war by trying to control thoughts by force. He won because he chose who he would agree with internally. There is a profound difference between a thought that passes and a thought that settles. Most people do not lose faith because they stop believing in God. They lose faith because they begin to believe too much in their own unobserved thoughts. Jesus knew that the human mind, when it is not watched, becomes an open field for noise, distortion, and fear that disguises itself as wisdom. That is why one of the most constant practices of Jesus was silence. He withdrew. He stepped away from crowds. He chose moments of pause, not only because he was physically tired, but because he understood something few people understand even today. Silence reorganizes the mind. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of automatic reaction. It is the space where consciousness regains command. When you silence, you create distance between you and your thoughts, and distance creates clarity. Psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts without confusing yourself with them. The Bible already taught this when it said, "Examine yourselves." Not self-accusation, self-observation, loving vigilance. Maybe you have spent years trying to change your life without ever learning to observe your mind, reacting to everything, thinking everything, believing everything you feel, and that creates exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, existential exhaustion. The exhaustion of fighting yourself without realizing it. Jesus did not fight against himself. He governed himself. He did not suppress emotions, but he refused to be led by them. In Gethsemane, he felt deep anguish, but he chose alignment. That is spiritual maturity, not absence of pain, presence of direction. And there is something liberating in understanding this. You do not need to eliminate fear to live by faith. You only need to stop obeying fear. Fear can speak, but it does not need to decide. Doubt can arise, but it does not need to govern. A thought can appear, but it does not need to become truth. When Jesus said, "Let not your heart be troubled," he was not asking for something impossible. He was teaching an internal practice. Trouble is inner agitation, and inner agitation is born from identification with unstable thoughts. The peace Jesus promised is not the absence of problems. It is internal stability in the middle of them. Maybe you have been searching for peace by changing circumstances, but Jesus always invited something else. Change inner posture. The kingdom of God does not come with outward appearance. It is within you. And that changes everything. Because if transformation begins inside, it sustains outside. Science confirms that consistent mental states alter the body, the nervous system, time perception, even the way we handle challenges. The Bible calls this the renewal of the mind. This is not positive thinking. This is alignment with truth, replacing destructive internal narratives with a deeper, steadier vision. And here is a truth that few people say. The mind does not renew by effort. It renews by practice. Small daily choices, small moments of silence, small decisions to not agree with everything that rises internally. That is how Jesus lived, not in tension, in presence. Maybe you are waiting for a big external sign to change, but the greatest sign is already available: awareness. The fact that you are recognizing there is an internal war already changes the dynamic, because what is seen loses power. What is unconscious governs. What is conscious can be chosen. Jesus never promised a life without conflict. He promised a guarded mind. And the peace of God, which surpasses understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. Notice: guard, protect, sustain. This is not fragile emotional peace. This is structural peace. And here is everything that closes. You are not late. You are not lost. You are not weak. You were simply trying to win from the wrong side of the battle. Victory begins when you stop fighting yourself and start aligning with the truth already living inside you. Now we need to go deeper, because if you truly understand what is happening inside you, you will stop blaming yourself for things that were never your fault, and you will stop fighting the wrong enemy. Because the war is not mainly happening in your circumstances. It is happening in your interpretation of your circumstances. It is happening in your mind. And the mind is not neutral. The mind is a garden. And if you do not watch what grows there, something else will plant seeds for you. This is why Jesus emphasized watchfulness so intensely. Because Jesus knew that most people do not fall because they want to fall. They fall because they slowly drift. They drift in small ways. They drift in quiet ways. They drift through internal agreements that they never consciously made. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most of the thoughts that destroy your peace do not look like evil. They look like you. They sound like your voice. They feel like your logic. They feel like your personality. And that is what makes them so dangerous. Because if the thought came in an obvious form, as a clear lie, you would reject it immediately. But the thoughts that weaken faith rarely come as obvious lies. They come as reasonable conclusions. They come as protective assumptions. They come as realistic expectations. They come as wise caution. But underneath, they are agreements. And agreements create internal alignment. You are always aligned with something. The question is, are you aligned with fear or with truth? Are you aligned with your past or with God's promise? Are you aligned with your pain or with your purpose? Because you cannot be aligned with everything at the same time. Your mind will follow the strongest agreement. And what becomes strongest is what is repeated most often. This is why repetition is such a powerful spiritual weapon. Not only repetition of scripture, but repetition of inner narratives. Because repetition creates belief. Belief creates posture, creates action. Action creates results. Results reinforce belief. And the cycle continues. This is why some people live their entire lives inside the same mental prison. Not because God is absent, not because they are cursed, but because they never broke the inner cycle. And Jesus came not only to forgive sin, but to break cycles, to break chains, to restore the mind, to restore the heart, to restore the inner government of the self. And you need to understand something clearly. The enemy does not always attack you with tragedy. Sometimes he attacks you with normality. He attacks you with routine. He attacks you with mental fatigue. He attacks you with just enough stress to keep you distracted. Because if you are constantly busy, you are rarely aware. And if you are rarely aware, you are easy to influence. Jesus understood that awareness is power. That is why he could walk through crowds and remain internally stable. That is why he could face rejection without losing identity. That is why he could be betrayed without becoming bitter. That is why he could be misunderstood without becoming insecure. Because he was not governed by external events. He was governed by inner alignment. And that is exactly what you are being invited into. Not religion. Alignment. Not performance. Presence. Not anxiety-driven faith, but grounded faith. The kind of faith that doesn't collapse every time life shakes. Now, to understand this at the deepest level, we need to expose the real mechanism. Because most people think faith is something you try harder to have. But faith is not produced by effort. Faith is produced by inner agreement. And inner agreement is shaped by attention. This is why Jesus constantly returned to one theme: do you believe? But he didn't ask that as a religious test. He asked it as a doorway. Because what you believe determines what you allow. What you allow determines what you tolerate. What you tolerate becomes normal. And what becomes normal becomes your life. Now listen carefully. There is a specific mental posture that weakens faith more than any other. And it is not doubt itself. It is what doubt becomes when it is repeated. Because doubt in the beginning is a question. But doubt repeated becomes identity. And identity is the most powerful force in your life. Because you will always behave in alignment with who you believe you are, even when you consciously want something else. This is why people sabotage blessings, not because they don't want them, but because internally they don't see themselves as someone who receives. They don't see themselves as someone who is chosen. They don't see themselves as someone who is favored. They don't see themselves as someone who is protected. And so even when God opens doors, they hesitate. Even when God answers, they second guess. Even when God provides, they fear losing it. Because the internal narrative is stronger than the external miracle. And Jesus came to heal that narrative. This is why so many of his miracles were preceded by one thing: a question. What do you want me to do for you? Not because Jesus didn't know, but because he was forcing the person to confront their internal posture. Because many people have desires but no internal permission. They want healing, but they don't believe healing belongs to them. They want peace, but they don't believe peace is possible for them. They want restoration, but they don't believe restoration is for their story. And that is where the war is hidden. In the quiet thought that says, maybe God will do it, but probably not for me. That thought is the poison, because it looks like realism. It looks like maturity. It looks like being careful. But in reality, it is spiritual self-exclusion. It is the mind placing itself outside the promise. And Jesus did not tolerate that. He always brought people back into the promise. He always brought people back into identity. He always brought people back into belonging. This is why he healed outsiders. This is why he touched lepers. This is why he spoke to rejected women. This is why he restored broken men. Because he was not only healing bodies, he was restoring belonging. He was restoring identity. And you need to hear this clearly. Faith is not only about believing God exists. Faith is believing God includes you. Faith is not only believing God can, faith is believing God will. Not because you earned it, but because He is good. And this is where most people break. because they have been disappointed too many times. They have waited too long. They have been hurt too deeply. And the mind learns to protect itself. The mind learns to reduce expectation. The mind learns to lower hope. The mind learns to say, don't get excited, don't expect too much, don't trust fully, because you might be disappointed again. And that sounds like wisdom, but it is fear disguised as maturity. It is pain disguised as prudence. It is trauma disguised as realism. And Jesus came to set you free from that, not by forcing you to pretend pain didn't happen, but by teaching you not to live inside pain, because pain is an event. But if you let it become your identity, it becomes a prison. This is why Jesus said, "Take heart, be of good cheer, peace be with you." These are not motivational quotes. They are instructions for internal posture, because posture determines perception, and perception determines experience. Two people can live the same external situation and experience completely different realities. One lives in fear. One lives in faith. One lives in anxiety. One lives in peace. One lives in bitterness. One lives in surrender. What is the difference? Not the circumstances, the mind, the inner agreement. This is why the Bible speaks so much about guarding the heart, because the heart is not fragile emotion. The heart is the control center. It is the inner government. And if you do not guard it, something else will govern it for you. And the mind, when unguarded, will naturally drift toward fear, because fear is the brain's default protection system. The human nervous system is designed to scan for threat. That is not sin. That is biology. But Jesus did not come to leave you trapped in biology. He came to elevate you into spiritual authority. He came to teach you that you are not only a nervous system. You are not only an emotional being. You are a spiritual being, and the spirit can lead the mind. This is what Paul meant when he said, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." He did not say be transformed by changing your circumstances. He said, renew your mind, because when the mind renews, everything else follows. Now, here is where it becomes very practical, because you might be listening to this thinking, okay, but how do I do it? How do I stop agreeing with the wrong thoughts? How do I stop the inner noise? How do I stop the anxiety? How do I stop the fear? And the answer is not complicated, but it is not easy, because it requires a skill most people were never taught: discernment. Discernment is spiritual intelligence. Discernment is inner maturity. Discernment is what Jesus practiced constantly, because Jesus did not live in reaction. He lived in response, and there is a huge difference. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Reaction is fear-based. Response is truth-based. This is why Jesus could stand in front of accusation and remain silent. Not because he was weak, but because he was not emotionally manipulated. He was not controlled by other people's chaos. He was not controlled by other people's opinions. He was not controlled by other people's projections. He was aligned. And alignment makes you untouchable internally. Not untouchable externally. Life still happens, but untouchable in the deepest place, your identity. This is why Jesus said, "The prince of this world comes, and he has nothing in me." That is one of the most powerful sentences in Scripture, because Jesus was saying, yes, the enemy is coming, but there is no agreement inside me. There is no hook. There is no open door. There is no internal alignment with fear. There is no internal alignment with lies. And that's the goal for you too. Not perfection, alignment. Not control, clarity. Not suppression, discernment. Now, let's bring this to your daily life, because this war does not happen only in dramatic moments. It happens in the morning, when you wake up and immediately feel the weight of life. It happens when you open your phone and your mind is flooded with information. It happens when you remember something painful. It happens when you anticipate something uncertain. It happens when you feel lonely. It happens when you feel overwhelmed. It happens when you feel like you're behind. It happens when you feel like you're not enough. And in those moments, your mind begins to generate thoughts automatically. Thoughts like, you're falling behind, you're wasting time, you're not doing enough, you'll never change, you always fail, you're not like the others, God is not going to answer, you've been waiting too long, you are not chosen, you are not special, you are not strong, you are not faithful. And here is what most people do. They treat those thoughts as themselves. They treat them as truth. They treat them as reality. But Jesus teaches something radically different. He teaches that thoughts are not you. Thoughts are suggestions. Thoughts are invitations. Thoughts are voices. But you decide which voice becomes agreement. This is why the Bible says, take every thought captive. Not suppress it, not fight it, capture it. Meaning, bring it into awareness. Observe it, discern it, and then decide, does this thought align with truth? Does this thought align with God? Does this thought produce peace? Does this thought produce clarity? Does this thought strengthen faith? Or does it produce fear? Does it produce heaviness? Does it produce confusion? Does it produce hopelessness? Because if it produces hopelessness, it is not from God. God does not lead through despair. God does not guide through anxiety. God does not speak through shame. Yes, God convicts, but conviction is different from condemnation. Conviction points you forward. Condemnation crushes you. Conviction produces clarity. Condemnation produces fog. Conviction produces hope. Condemnation produces paralysis. And this is where many people confuse voices. They confuse their own fear with God's warning. They confuse anxiety with spiritual discernment. They confuse heaviness with wisdom. And that is why they stay stuck, because they are obeying the wrong voice while thinking they are being responsible. But Jesus never led through heaviness. Jesus led through peace. Even when the message was hard, even when the path was painful, even when the sacrifice was real, there was always clarity. There was always direction. There was always inner steadiness. And that is what you were being invited into. Now, here is a key principle. The mind does not change by argument. The mind changes by repetition of truth, because repetition rewires the brain. Repetition strengthens pathways. This is why Jesus responded to temptation with Scripture. Not because Scripture is magic, but because truth repeated becomes internal structure. Truth becomes a mental home. And when you live inside truth, lies cannot stay. Now, in the next part, we are going to go even deeper. We are going to expose the exact mental trap that makes people feel spiritually tired. The hidden pattern that causes people to pray but still feel heavy afterward. The mechanism that makes people listen to sermons but still return to the same inner fog. And we are going to show how Jesus dismantled it with a simple practice. A practice that is not complicated, but it is life-changing. So stay with me. Now we reach the core. Because everything we've said so far is true, but if you don't identify the exact mental trap that causes spiritual exhaustion, you will keep praying and still feel heavy afterward. You will keep listening to messages and still return to the same inner fog. You will keep trying to trust and still feel like something inside you refuses to fully surrender. And you will begin to think the problem is you, but it isn't. The problem is not that you are broken. The problem is not that you are weak. The problem is not that you are not spiritually enough. The problem is that you have been living in a mental system that slowly drains faith without you realizing. And Jesus knew this. That is why he did not only preach about behavior, he preached about the inner world. He preached about what happens inside a person before anything happens outside. This is why Jesus said, "The eye is the lamp of the body." If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. Most people read that and think Jesus is talking about morality, but he is talking about perception. He is talking about focus. He is talking about what you constantly look at internally, because whatever you focus on consistently becomes the atmosphere of your mind, and the atmosphere of your mind becomes the atmosphere of your life. Now, here is the trap that weakens faith more than anything else, the trap that creates spiritual tiredness, the trap that makes people pray but still feel empty. It is not sin in the obvious form. It is not rebellion. It is not hatred. It is not anger. It is something far more subtle. It is the constant internal negotiation with fear. It is when your mind lives in a loop of analysis, a loop of overthinking, a loop of what if, a loop of anticipating the worst, a loop of rehearsing failure, a loop of revisiting pain, a loop of replaying the past, a loop of trying to control the future. And the reason this is so exhausting is because the mind was never designed to carry the weight of being God. Your mind is not built to manage everything. Your mind is built to follow something. And if it is not following truth, it will follow fear. This is why so many people feel tired even when they are not doing anything physically difficult, because their mind is working constantly, trying to solve, trying to predict, trying to prevent pain, trying to avoid disappointment, trying to protect them. But the cost is peace. The cost is faith. The cost is inner rest. This is why Jesus said, "Do not worry." And he didn't say that as a casual statement. He said that as a command, not because worry is immoral, but because worry is spiritual misalignment. Worry is the mind trying to sit on the throne that belongs to God. Worry is the mind trying to take control of what it was never meant to control. And the reason worry destroys faith is because you cannot fully trust God and fully trust your fear at the same time. One will always dominate. Now, you might be thinking, but I can't help it. I don't choose to worry. And you're right, you don't choose the first thought, but you choose the agreement. You choose the conversation. You choose the repetition. And this is where Jesus' teaching becomes unbelievably practical, because Jesus did not teach you to stop thoughts from appearing. He taught you to stop building homes in the wrong thoughts. He taught you to stop feeding them. He taught you to stop negotiating with them. Because here's what happens. A thought appears. It says, what if this doesn't work? What if God doesn't answer? What if you fail again? What if you lose everything? What if you are not enough? And then most people do something automatically. They respond. They enter into the thought. They begin a conversation. They begin to argue. They begin to explain. They begin to justify. They begin to analyze. They begin to prove. They begin to defend. And that conversation gives the thought energy. It strengthens the pathway. It deepens the pattern. And the thought becomes more convincing. This is why some people feel trapped, because they are not trapped by the thought itself. They are trapped by the relationship they have with the thought. They are trapped by the dialogue. They are trapped by the inner negotiation. But Jesus did not negotiate with lies. He did not entertain fear. He did not argue with distortion. He responded with truth and ended it. This is why the temptation in the desert is so important, because it reveals the blueprint. The enemy comes and says, "If you are the Son of God." That sentence is not about bread. It is about identity. And Jesus responds, "It is written." Notice, Jesus does not say, "Let me explain why you're wrong." Jesus does not say, "Let me debate you." Jesus does not say, "Let me prove myself." He does not defend. He does not negotiate. He does not react emotionally. He simply declares truth, and truth closes the conversation. Truth ends the negotiation. Truth removes the oxygen, and the enemy cannot survive where there is no agreement. This is why spiritual maturity is not loud. It is quiet. It is calm. It is stable. It is grounded. It is not frantic. It is not constantly trying to fix everything. It is not constantly trying to understand everything. It is not constantly trying to control everything, because mature faith understands something deeply. Some things are not solved mentally. Some things are surrendered spiritually. And this is what Jesus practiced daily. This is why Jesus withdrew into solitude. This is why Jesus went to the mountain. This is why Jesus prayed early in the morning, not because he needed God to hear him, but because he was reorganizing his inner world. He was aligning his mind. He was returning to truth. He was cleansing perception. He was removing the noise. He was renewing the inner government. Because you cannot live in a noisy world and keep a clear mind without intentional alignment. The world is constantly planting thoughts. Social media plants thoughts. News plants thoughts. Other people plant thoughts. Your past plants thoughts. Your pain plants thoughts. Your trauma plants thoughts. Your disappointments plant thoughts. And if you do not watch your mind, you will grow a garden you never chose. This is why Jesus said, "Watch and pray." Not pray and forget. Watch and pray. Because prayer without watchfulness becomes ritual, but watchfulness with prayer becomes transformation. Now, let's talk about something very important. Why do so many people pray and still feel heavy afterward? Because they pray with the mouth, but keep negotiating in the mind. They pray for peace, but keep feeding anxiety. They pray for faith, but keep rehearsing fear. They pray for trust, but keep imagining betrayal. They pray for provision, but keep anticipating lack. They pray for healing, but keep identifying as broken. And again, this is not because they are evil. This is because the brain has learned patterns. And patterns do not change by desire. Patterns change by repeated new alignment. This is why Jesus did not just preach, he practiced. And he taught practice. He taught habits. He taught rhythms. He taught posture. Because faith is not a moment. Faith is a way of living. Now, here is one of the most powerful revelations. You do not need to eliminate negative thoughts to become strong. You only need to stop treating them as truth. Because thoughts are not always messages. Sometimes they are just noise. Sometimes they are just old emotional residue. Sometimes they are just the nervous system reacting. Sometimes they are just memories trying to protect you. Sometimes they are just fear. And fear is not a prophet. Fear is not wisdom. Fear is not direction. Fear is simply a signal that you feel unsafe. But you can feel unsafe and still choose faith. You can feel afraid and still obey God. You can feel uncertain and still move forward. You can feel weak and still remain aligned. This is why courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the refusal to obey fear. And Jesus lived that. He felt sorrow. He felt pain. He felt pressure. But he never surrendered his inner throne. He never surrendered his identity. He never surrendered his alignment. Now, I want you to hear this clearly. The enemy does not need you to stop praying. He only needs you to keep praying while your mind stays unchanged. Because prayer without renewal becomes exhausting. It becomes a cycle of hope and disappointment, a cycle of desire and frustration, a cycle of asking and doubting, and eventually, You start to feel numb. You start to feel tired. You start to feel like you're doing everything right, but nothing changes. But what if the change was never meant to start outside? What if the change was meant to start inside? What if the miracle you are waiting for is not only in your circumstances, but in your perception? Because when perception changes, everything changes. When your mind aligns, your nervous system calms. When your nervous system calms, your emotions stabilize. When your emotions stabilize, your choices improve. When your choices improve, your life begins to shift. This is why the Bible says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still. Stillness is not laziness. Stillness is inner authority. Stillness is the ability to stop reacting. Stillness is the ability to stop negotiating. Stillness is the ability to return to truth. And this is what Jesus was offering, not a religion of stress, not a life of fear, but a kingdom inside you, a kingdom of peace, a kingdom of clarity, a kingdom of alignment. Now, I want to bring this to a personal level, because maybe you are listening to this right now and you feel like you've been living in inner war for years. Maybe you feel like your mind never shuts off. Maybe you feel like you're always thinking, always analyzing, always worrying, always anticipating, always remembering, always trying to protect yourself, and you don't even realize how much energy that consumes. But here is the truth. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are simply carrying weight you were never designed to carry. And Jesus is inviting you to lay it down. Not someday, not when you feel ready, now. Because rest is not a reward, rest is a decision. This is why Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He did not say, "I will give you answers." He said, "I will give you rest." Because rest is the foundation. Rest is where faith grows. Rest is where the mind stops spinning. Rest is where alignment becomes possible. And now we reach the moment we promised, because everything we've said so far is meant to lead you to one thing: alignment. Not effort, not guilt, not religious pressure. Alignment. So right now, if you can, slow down, even if only for a moment. Do not multitask. Do not scroll. Do not rush. Just breathe. Because sometimes the greatest spiritual act is not doing more, but becoming present. Now we are going to pray. Not a long prayer, not a complicated prayer, a short prayer, but a deeply aligning prayer. A prayer that quiets the mind. A prayer that reorganizes the inner world. A prayer that returns the throne to where it belongs. If you can, close your eyes. If you can't, just focus inward and pray with me. Lord, in this moment, I surrender my mind. I surrender the thoughts that repeat. I surrender the doubts that have settled. I surrender the fears I didn't even realize I was feeding. I do not want to fight them with force. I choose not to agree with what does not come from you. Align my mind with your truth. Calm my inner world. Teach me to watch without fear, to observe without guilt, to trust without tension. Let your peace, which surpasses all understanding, guard my mind and my heart. I choose clarity. I choose faith. I choose